I'm Dean Newlund, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition. My next guest on the Business of Intuition will introduce a new roadmap for individuals, teams, and organizations to achieve their highest and best purpose. But before I bring you into our conversation, consider these three characteristics of human and social development. Number one, the intention. This is the ultimate desire, the Simon Sinek why, the fullest expression of one's purpose. Two, the priorities. Of the many ways to achieve the intention, these are the major goals that create focus and energy. And three, the actions. These are the behaviors and steps one takes in the direction of their priorities. For example, my intention might be to leave a meaningful legacy, my priority to publish a book, and my action to write for an hour every day. By linking actions to priorities to intentions, I've achieved alignment, defined as actions that accurately reflect priorities and intention. Now, consider the issues that you sometimes have or that you experience in your team or your organization having. You might say that your leaders say one thing but do another, or members of your team have competing priorities, or your company might have a solid operations plan, but people just don't take the appropriate action. The issue is a lack of alignment. My guest has created, actually, a new professional services category of alignment, where she and her team coach and facilitate individuals, teams, and organizations to ensure that actions accurately reflect priorities and intentions. Rachel Richter is the founder and managing partner of INLIGN, the premier alignment coaching and advisory practice for teams and organizations seeking to rectify misalignment and enable optimal functioning. Rachel also describes alignment as culture in action. Out of further demand, she founded something called Align and Thrive, the alignment coaching practice for individuals to make thriving attainable professionally and personally. Rachel Richter on the Business of Intuition. Well, Rachel, it's great to have you on the show today. And we've already had a long conversation before we've even started the recording. So we finally said, hey, let's stop talking. Let's start recording. There's three things that I wanted to lead into a question to you. And there's three issues that I sometimes see in training development. One is that we actually create siloed solutions. We don't create solutions that are interdependent. Let's get this guy an executive coach. Let's work with this team on their communication. Let's work with the executive group on strategy, but they're not all connected. The second one I sometimes see is that employees don't always see how they add value. They're in a silo. They don't know what they do, how it affects downstream work and solutions, let alone our end users. And the third thing I sometimes see is that we address symptoms and not the source. We don't get to root cause. We are reactive to the situation, but we don't really dig into why did that situation come about in its first place. And as I was going through this in my mind, I kept thinking, there's an alignment issue here. This is all about a lack of alignment, right? So, and I know this is what you're all about, which is why I'm so excited to have this conversation. With that being said, here's this stupid question, which we'll talk about for a long time. How do you create alignment?
I love it. And it's not a stupid question. In fact, this is the question that was the origin story of the entire practice that we have, actually, Dean. It became, so let me tell you the aha moment, because I think that'll help your listeners understand where I was and how we started creating this alignment on purpose. We'll put it that way. So I was previously working with clients doing tech transformations. And as you must know, the tech doesn't transform itself. People do. Now, Many people outside of technology, or rather inside technology, don't understand that. They think the tech really does transform itself just to some extent, but it's all about the people. And so to me, my entire career was spent working on systems implementations, transformation, organizational stuff, all of this. And what I realized is that it was all about alignment all along, but I didn't recognize it until a client once told me, I don't know what you did, but just so you know, our people are happy. They're more engaged. Our board is thrilled. And we've unlocked revenue through what you did. I don't know how you did it. It was some kind of Jedi thing, but the alignment that you gave us, we could not purchase that elsewhere. That's rare. And that was the light bulb moment where I thought, alignment. Oh, I had always considered that table stakes, right? To the real, quote unquote, the real work of technology. And I thought, well, geez, if that's rare and I love doing it, why don't I just do that and see what happens as a result? And so how do you create an alignment within an organization? It starts off with defining the word. The word itself matters. And we intuitively understand to a certain extent what alignment means, right? You can recognize it when things are in and out of alignment. But unless we have a word that creates measurability, which also then becomes and enables part of accountability, we don't have a way to create something that was more intuitive into something that's also more measurable. And so the definition that we came up with is when actions accurately reflect priorities and intentions. So
okay. That's your definition for alignment.
That's correct. And then we went around and battle tested that with some incredible people in the space and in many different industries and said, does this feel authentic to you? Would you use this in your practice? Does this make sense? Are we leaving anything out? We went through different combinations of words. And the reason we landed on those three, making sure that actions, priorities, and intentions are connected, is that at a personal level and an organizational level, the definition still has to make sense because it has to work for a person, regardless of what realm they're in, and it has to work for their team. It has to work for a department. It has to work for the organization.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be aligned. Even
that's correct.
It has to work individually. Right? Otherwise, right.
And so the reason we went with intention is because that is a word that means a desired state to resolve, to be in, or to create. And a person, when looking at this definition, the first question that some people really go to is, oh, well, what's my intention, right? If my actions, if alignment is when my actions accurately reflect my priorities and intentions, what's my intention, right? Work backwards. Now, most people, especially in business, don't go around thinking about intention. We think of goals and objectives and metrics. And I'm not saying any of those are not okay to think about. What I'm saying is we don't come to a place of seeing each other and being able to collaborate if we don't have the same or mutually beneficial intentions. It's much more difficult to create movement on big challenges unless we do that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the issues that I see is that we think we have the same intentions. We assume we have the same intentions.
Right.
We go off on our merry way, have our meetings, create some solutions on what we think are the same intentions, and don't realize, why are we not all agreeing? And it's not just because of the dynamics of this person talks too much and this person doesn't. It's about the fact that we didn't start from the same place.
Exactly right.
Right. I agree. So again, I love the definition. I think it's a good one. I totally agree that it has to work on the individual level, the team level, the organizational level. Heck, even the national level,
Yes, international level.
Interglobal level, right?
Yes.
The metaverse needs to align with Mars. So how do we then create alignment? If that's the definition, how do you solve for that?
Thank you. So we actually, again, all of this kind of like, if you think of a thought experiment, right? You're creating a new professional services category. What does it mean? How do you train it? How do you teach it? How do you engage with it with intention? Not just, oh, we happen to do great work and create alignment. So the material that we've created is, okay, well, where does alignment need to start? Right? Where is always the most specific starting point? And
all right. Yeah, right on.
Exactly. So it starts with you. You aligned with yourself.
Interesting.
Right? Your own actions reflective of your priorities and your intentions. And we talk about you aligned with your role, because those two things are different. And by creating space between you and your role, we allow people room to be themselves more without saying, I'm just this position. It helps bring authenticity to the table.
All right. So let's, because I know we can scale from the individual, and we will, but let's hold for a second. So the individual needs to understand what their intentions are, and then we would want to align the role, as to your point, to those intentions. Hence that we have authenticity, right? And engagement that would come from that. Well, then how would you then counter the comment that says, well, I know what my intention is. My role doesn't fit it. Do I quit?
So then the question is, are the people, so that's an assumption, right? Is you say your role doesn't fit this thing.
Right.
Well, does it? Like, is that true? First, let's check our assumptions always.
Let's say it's true. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Let's say that it is true. Then the question is, are you in a position of authority or influence to be able to shift that because it mutually benefits the organization?
Meaning, let's play that analogy out even further.
Yes.
I've checked my intentions. I'm clear. I've checked my assumptions that maybe the role could or couldn't align to my intentions. Let's say, just for kicks and giggles, that I realized, no, it doesn't. Going back to the title of the show, intuitively, I know this isn't the right role for me.
That's correct.
My dear boy son, Taylor, who's 22 now, he is taking a temporary job because he was let go because the company was working with went bankrupt. And so he had to continue to work. So now he's doing construction and metal grinding, cement work. It's not his passion. He does not like this work. And I knew it. He knows it. If this is just a financial thing. So if you were to use him or somebody else in that particular analogy, his intentions are to do music and to do something else. Right now, he's not aligned to that. So that decision is, yes, we know it's short term. He knows it's short term. He's probably going to move on to something that is more aligned to it. So does that fit in your model?
Absolutely. Well, that's the question, is why are you doing a thing that isn't aligned with you? We can get even a little more meta and saying, is there a hidden intention? Because you can reverse engineer this, right? You can look at a person's actions and go, okay, or your own, right? And say, well, if my intention is really this, but I'm doing this, and I've been doing this for an awfully long time, it was supposed to be short term and it isn't. What is driving this action? What other hidden intention, probably related to a belief, that's driving this action? And so this conversation opens the door for personal self-exploration of that, because now we're talking about actions being better, not people being better. And so people get more white space to discover and reflect, so that they're, and without feeling defensive, because we're not talking about them being better. We're talking about the actions being more aligned.
That's a good distinction. So I do think you're right that we will see we'll have people define this in different ways, but saying the same thing, that they are doing one thing, but they have a value system that doesn't align to it. Or I'm married to somebody, and we're not happy. And so we decide that we're going to part ways. But what you're saying is that there could be a hidden intention that is part of the reason why we're in the marriage in the first place, right? And I'm in the same boat. I was married once many, many years ago, and I could probably, with a little bit of, scratching on my journal, understand what my hidden intentions were, which I'll tell you right now, it was to please people. It was to avoid conflict. It was to make sure that I didn't have to tell all of my family who was flying out to this wedding, nope, everybody go back home. Because even though I was walking down the aisle, I knew that it was the wrong thing. I thought, like, my hidden intention is I don't want to disappoint everybody, right? There you go. But it didn't align with my greater purpose, which was, fulfilling partnership, which I ended up finding soon after that. So anyway, I'm adding story to your model.
I love it. Well, that's the beauty. That's why we chose these three particular words, because at the end of the day, and I have said this before, but in other places, but the action itself matters so much, because the intention is just words unless you follow up, right?
Correct.
And so making sure that we're really focused on having the action, obviously, because that's how you get results, be the thing we focus on, not the person. And then making sure that the things we prioritize are the things that we act on, and that what we intend to do is reflected in those priorities.
I would say priority, intention, action.
Intention. Yeah. So intention is the highest of these three. Intention, priority, action.
Okay.
You're going to prioritize things that align with your intention. You're going to act on those priorities.
So, because you could have literally hundreds of different.
That's right.
Priorities, but you need to choose those that are aligned to your, I guess what it makes I guess I'm struggling a little bit. What's the difference between a priority and intention?
So priorities are so if my intention is to, what would you like to, I'll go with your example. Do you want to put an example out? Because then we can walk through it. I want it to be relevant.
Bring it.
Interested in.
Bring
Yeah.
it.
So what is an intention that you would want to walk through? Because then I can differentiate between the two.
Writing a book.
Okay. So what is the intention behind writing the book?
Leaving a legacy.
That's your intention.
Okay.
The book is the priority, because you
understood. Okay. So it's not the last stop on our travels. It's a couple. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That helps. That's a good way of saying. And then, of course, the actions are going then to align to the priorities, which are going to align to your ultimate. I got it.
Exactly.
All right. So this is good, Rachel. So bring me up another level, which is around the team and then ultimately the organization.
Yeah. So after we talk through aligning with, there are many levels that we walk leaders through during these experiences and retreats that we hold. But one of the levels down the list is alignment with you and the team that you're on,
mm-hmm.
and alignment with you and the team that you lead, right? So those two things are different. If you're an executive, right, you're on the executive team, but then you're also leading a team. Yes. And so then we walk into interpersonal alignment. So you can have alignment with yourself, which is really important. And at the same time, you can be working on alignment with your team. And so that is when you say, okay, well, here's my intention as an individual and with what I'm doing in this role, right? Here's your intention. Here's your intention. Here's your intention. We're all on the same team. Are these mutually beneficial, or are these the same? If they are, great. We're off to a good start, because we don't have anything hidden that's going to disrupt this train from moving forwards as fast as possible. But if our intentions are not mutually beneficial, or they are not the same, that is where you start having a lot of friction happen as a result.
So
you would want to start creating alignment on a team.
Okay. So you said if they're not the same, or if they're not beneficial.
Mutually beneficial.
Mutually beneficial. So they could be very different. I could have my team of 20 or 10 or whatever it is. Each individual person could have different intentions, but they could they could support each other's intentions. But when you talk about intentions, are you talking about intentions based on your personal aspirations as a human being on this planet Earth? Or are you talking about intentions relative to my role in this company?
For some people, it could be both. Other people prefer to wall off their work separately from their personal life. We all show up differently at the office, right? And so it depends on what that person's intention is in that role that they're serving.
Okay.
So whatever they're bringing to the table for their intention is what would need in that moment to be mutually beneficial. So nothing has to get really to the point of the book example, legacy, very, very high. It can be, I want to collaborate, or I want this project to succeed because it's going to help me over here. Like this going to be bigger picture than the priority, but it doesn't have to be, meta.
Right. Okay. And then I guess when you think about the organization, and then the organization, or even teams, have clients. They have people that they serve, right?
Mhm.
How does then scale to the end user? Let's say we're a software company. You were in tech, right? There's somebody out there using your software, which is the purpose behind all of what this is about as a company, is to provide some sort of improvement in this person's life, and the product is going to help us get there, I'm assuming. How does it align to that?
So we actually use alignment as the foundation of creating better, faster, more performing organizations in terms of how they show up. So if you think about, again, you would want alignment to greater achieve the needs of the business and the needs of the market, because those are the two things that matter. And you can subdivide the market and talk about specifically your customers, either internal or external or both. But I would say if you want to be not disrupted in the future, you would also think about the needs of the market, not just your current customers. And you want to be able to create alignment around every level of your organization so that you can then do that better and faster together. Because the thing that inhibits a lot of innovation is silos, to your point earlier.
I totally agree with you on that. So here's why I'm asking this, because I've thought a lot about this as well, and I'm really fascinated by your perspective on this, and I'm still evolving in this as well. But I've had a perspective that it's almost it's a flipped model. So I'm not saying you couldn't do the individual work like what you're saying and you work your way up, but what I've thought about is what's the purpose of the organization? And so I've begun to think about almost like Amazon talks about, the customer experience. Working backwards is a famous book right now that a few of the key leaders within Amazon has written, and I've thought a lot about this. And so I'm curious about your thought. Is this to say, what are the major customer categories that we are serving? What are their beliefs, their desires, and their worries? What is it they're really all about? Which would be another way of probably uncovering their intentions, right? And then what's the customer promise that we would want to provide them that if we could, we would be playing at our highest and best and being able to serve them at their highest and best. This is our customer, right? And then what kind of a team do we need to be in order to live up to those promises? What promises do we need to make to each other? And then bringing it down to the individual, what sort of promises do we need to make to ourselves, alignment with our own intentions that then allow us to be the highest and best member of that team. So then we got individual, the team, to promise to customer. And that's but it's sort of broken from a different, not bottom up, but more top down. What's your thoughts on that?
So I would say both are the exact thing that we should be doing. When we work with organizations, we actually do work with the team itself and with individuals simultaneously.
So you're kind of coming from both perspectives.
That's right. Because the only way to create elevated and escalated change is if you do both. Otherwise, it just kind of, again, so I have a heavy math background. And so I tend to think in terms of mathematical concepts. And when I look at an organization as a set, like any other set, it's defined by its components, and its components are people. And so if you want to change the organization, it means changing every single part of that set. And so you're going to work at the group level, you're going to work at the org level, you're going to work at the comms level to trickle things down and up. You're going to work with individuals. You're going to do all of that to shift and really move. And so we do both. And I love that you went there, because that's exactly the approach that is needed. And in fact, one of the things that made me giddy recently was when one of our clients, the VP of sales, started using alignment as the foundation of how he wants to drive revenue and growth with external customers by engaging in strategic and key relationships, by creating greater alignment with them, by understanding that their intentions are mutually beneficial. And so by having that conversation with clients, he had been able to start doing that. So it works in many, like you said, you could go globally with this. You talk about
you definitely could. Well, and it works with, if you get into physics and you get into, science, there is alignment in nature, but we don't operate our businesses under those same sort of constructs. And that's maybe one reason why we're out of sync, is because we don't.
I love that insight, actually. I had not connected the two, but I am a huge fan of, amateur reader of quantum physics, shall we say. find it
Yeah.
fascinating. And it would make sense that we develop this practice as a result.
Well, you just think about that. There's like when you get into the quantum physics, there really is very little matter at all. And even when you get to that level and you keep going further and further and further, it gets so small that all there really is energy, and thought and intention, going back to your word earlier, is energy.
Yes. That
then plays a part of this larger cosmic soup that we are connected to. This table that I'm here having this computer on is nothing more than a certain set of energies. My hand can't come through it, but of course, when you get down to that, that micro level, it's just blank space with energy.
Yeah, matter, I think, is around 6% of the universe, and so, or matter as we know it. Then there's
right, as we know, yeah, right, exactly. And thought, of course, is energy. This is great. I love this discussion. So, without getting too much more into the academic side of it, I want to give somebody who's listening to this something to do. What could they do?
That's great. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about anyone in general in their life? Who do you want to address?
Yeah. Let's say I am a leader of a company. I'm a CEO. I've got multiple departments report under me. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. Rachel, thank you very much. Heck, yeah, maybe I'll call you sometime. But in the meantime, is there something that might be useful for me to consider or useful for me to take action on?
I love that question. So the things that I would think about at this point, so I'll go with a two-pronged answer. The first is, again, no leader would ever say alignment. I don't need that, right? It's absurd on its face, and there's a reason behind that. And so the real question is, where are your sources of misalignment and what are the symptoms? And are these urgent things that you want to address sooner rather than later? How are they affecting other things that you're not necessarily thinking about, right? So do you or your teams feel that there are silos that are stopping progress from happening or preventing innovation or are preventing communication? Is there office politics to a point that is actually inhibiting your mission execution, right? Are these things happening in such a way that you would like to more optimize the functionality of the organization? If that is in any way true, thinking about the intention of the organization, the intention of each department, and how those things are either incentivized or disincentivized from a compensation plan action. I'm just trying to give you something very, very, very edible.
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point. Yeah.
Right? Because you want your comp structure and you want your departments in general to be incentivized to all be working towards the same thing.
So what I wrote down as you were talking was that, people seem to behave in the area in which they are measured. So how do we measure alignment? If we have a measurement process that supports silos.
There it is. And that's actually one of the reasons. So I'm just going to go back to the definition for 2 quick seconds so that we can get on the same page on this. It came, again, this was born from me with a kind of math hat on going, okay, well, alignment's awesome, really needed, like you said, but if we can't measure it, the organization can't measure its maturity. We won't be able to get better or worse at it. We won't know where we stand. We can't survey it. Like, we can't do anything about that.
Right.
And so making it simple, making it approachable, having actions, you can even survey people and you can ask department heads, do the actions currently reflect priorities and intentions? And you can ask it about a variety of different issues. You can literally start to survey that. And we can get into shades of gray and what that might look like and how we do that organizational work. But it gives you kind of a flavor of, you can actually start asking this question.
So all right, that's a good, do actions reflect priorities and intention, right?
Right.
Okay, so then here's the answer that some smart ass would say, no. Right. Now what?
Now what? And you might want to, I'm not trying to be self-promotional, but that's like literally what we do is help companies go, okay, we want better alignment to fill in the blank, increase engagement, maximize business performance, optimize functionality, et cetera, build connection, destroy silos, all that, dissolve them. That's literally what we do to help companies do that. Because how do I put this? I hesitate to give you a granular example of what that might look like other than the ways we engage, because it's so different depending on the people and politics and structures involved. And so I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea about what is possible around creating alignment.
But eventually you want to work your way out of a job, right? You want them to survive and thrive on their own, right?
That's what we teach. Yes.
Yeah, you're not like a software company that says you got to keep coming back for your yearly subscription because you can't survive without that. It's not that.
No, we are actually, our mission is actually to grow alignment as a core competency for organizations, because again, it's not their fault. No one, this definition didn't even exist 3 years ago, right? So how do we grow a core competency in something that is so needed in the world today? Because collaboration is what is essential to solving our biggest challenges. And usually within our companies and within our world, we can't solve those challenges within a single department or sometimes a single company. And so it's imperative to grow a core competency around creating alignment.
And so then it goes back to that, my question. When I hear things like core competency, I think about measurement. I think about 360s. I think about
that's what we do. Yep.
Performance management processes. Can you and do you create a way to define that core competency and measure a person against it?
That's exactly what we're doing. So we do a number of services, alignment 360s, alignment retrospectives. We could go into, I just, however much you want to go into the details of, but it's how does again, I like to be at the question level, because then we can answer that really well. Right. How does alignment need to show up at an organizational, departmental, and individual level and a team level in order to create this effectively? And so all of the tools, techniques, and ways that we engage at each and every one of those levels, so that we can actually have clients that start to sail and fly on their own.
I have a kind of an existential question for you. The intention, I think, of human beings is alignment. I think somewhere deep in our soul, right? We want to be connected. COVID has been a slap in the face with our disconnection. People are clamoring to get back. We've been really, really busy this year because people want to bring us back together. We want to get back together. I just came off of a plane this morning, right? We're always wanting to get back together. I think there's an innate, deep soul reason that we want to connect with people. We want that alignment. And I'm also clear that there is a human condition that resists it, that call it, I want my autonomy, call it my primordial mind. My brain is set up to see you as either a threat or a benefit, something to eat or procreate with, right? There's something about our innate human beingness that is counter to this intention around alignment. Like I've always thought when we were doing teamwork long time ago, and I thought in one way we want to be a part of a team. And in another way, we really don't want to be a part of a team. There is a part of us that wants to be separate, wants to, and call it our issues, our mechanisms and so forth. We could say, you're the problem, I'm not the problem, I want my autonomy, all those things. What's your thought about how this, from an evolutionary perspective of the human condition, are we going against millennia of DNA programming for separation?
I love that you asked that. And okay, so I'm going to pause for a second, collect my thoughts on this, because I really love that question. So we talked about how alignment is important for connection, right? Now, when we think about the problems that we have in our world, and I know some people go, problems, don't use that word, use challenges or opportunities. Cool, let's pick whatever word we want. There are things that are creating friction and ill effect in our world that we need to solve for. Now, when you think on a grand scale, because you talk about the evolutionary history, so I think about recorded history through now, right? And you think about it, I'm a very pattern-oriented person, and our company is very much driven that way. You think about the issues of the day that have occurred over millennia and what kind of not the root cause is, but the root action cause, right? Like there might be an intention or belief that has changed over time, but the actual pattern, the result, the actions that have happened over and over and over again to cause these ill effects, what is it? In my personal view, and I've taken a long time to consider this, it's othering. When we other ourselves, we disconnect from ourselves. When we blame, shame, judge ourselves, it's othering ourselves. When we other people, right? Oh, they're from the other department. I don't need to work with them. I have my own swim lane. They're from the other party. They're from the other religion. They're from the other country. Other. It is
in-group, out-group. Yeah.
Disconnecting. And it's, again, we bring it back to ourselves. When we other people, we also other ourselves.
Agreed. And isn't this has been around for as long as human beings have been alive? And it was probably born out of a need for survival.
Yes.
You are the other because you're going to attack me and my family. You are the other because you're the saber-toothed tiger coming into my hut, right? So we've created an other perspective out of survival. We are no longer needing to survive, at least a lot of us. Some of us are in a situation that's different. But as a human species, we're moving away from the need for that.
That's exactly right. And I would say that whenever you or I, because I know everyone here, right? We're all living the human experience. And that experience includes moments where you might have flashed back to a thing where you felt a real desire or need for safety and survival. And so your behavior starts to actually just align with that versus your higher intentions in your general life. And so it's a process of actually alignment's beautiful because you also get to sit back and notice where your mind is going. You get to be reflective. And so you can start to think about what might be driving that in the moment, to see where your value system collapsed back to survival and go, is that really where I am? Do I really want to believe this? Is this something that's true right now for me? Survival? Or am I in pick the month, year, day, discuss who you are in life, say your name, and you go, oh, no, that's not me. I'm here. I want to be here. This is my choice.
I think I'm getting what you're trying to say, and I'll put it in a different way. I was just talking to a group about this yesterday, that your brain doesn't have to run the show. Your intentions can actually be the driver of this whole thing. So we could overshoot or pass by some of these innate human conditions through our intentionality that says we don't necessarily have to other others, create that separation if we intend something else.
Exactly. It's being conscious of our intentions that then drives the practice itself. When we are unconscious of intentions, we don't know where we're going, right? Imagine a pilot flying a plane and he goes, I don't know where I'm going. It's just here in the ether, just going to keep going straight. You'll make a left versus no, I'm flying everyone to Bali. And I've also ordered everyone champagne. I've done this intentionally because of X, right?
Yeah.
Like we can start to reframe and be intentional about our thoughts and our actions.
So it almost seems that to me in your model, the most important, if I had to prioritize, would be intention. It's almost like it's the driving force that moves us through new behavior, that everything else follows through around that.
It is the driving force, but I would say is what's so important is a lot of times, I love to use this example. You know, when companies write down kind of their intentions around their culture, and it's all of these words on a board.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I've even had someone bring the 4x6 board onto a call with me and go, look, we did the culture thing, but nothing happened. And I said, right, those are words. And I am the first person to tell you the importance of language, right?
Yes.
At the end of the day, they're just words unless you follow them up with prioritizing what they mean and acting on it.
Good point. I could see we could go for a couple hours here. I have to say one more thing, and I want to ask you another question because I really would love that. This is great. We're probably going to have to talk more after we hit the, stop record button. What I've also made me think of is that let me give you an example. A person who is urgency addicted.
Yes.
They're constantly running for whatever reason, right? And all of a sudden they slow down, they go to Maui, they sit on the beach and they start having panic attacks because they don't know what that peace feels like, right?
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like we talk about connection, but when we have it, we have a fear of it because it's so different than our habitual way of behaving around stress, whatever, add whatever malady you have. But when you actually feel healthy, or when you feel connected, you feel aligned, it feels so different. It's such a shock to the system for some that you kind of go, I got to sabotage this.
Yes. I love that I have goosebumps right now. I listened to a person who, and I am including myself in this, anyone who knew me, I'm 36 now, but in my very young 20s, I had a very messy room. I mean, it was horribly disorganized, not slovenly, but just very messy. You would not want to live there. And I remember when I first started to clean my room, just clean my room, right? Not a very high bar. For me, I was very proud of this. I cleaned it and I got massively uncomfortable because for the first time, everything was organized and there was, and it was that feeling you just talked about. And what I would say is when we have connection, both to ourselves and others, there is greater vulnerability. And when you have quiet and there's more vulnerability, then you're looking at things potentially that you weren't looking at before.
So have you ever watched a movie called Insei, INNSAEI? It's going to be hard to find, but go on YouTube and see if you can find it. There's a gal named Maria Regvanovich. I think she was, I don't know, Eastern Bloc performance artist. Long story short, she had a Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, exhibition that was the most popular in its history. And all she would do is sit on a chair and another person would sit facing her. And all they would do would look at each other in their eyes. You know what I'm talking about.
I know. Oh my gosh. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's the energy that you mentioned earlier too, right? You're sitting there looking into someone's eyes. That is a very high level of energy that a lot of people aren't necessarily used to engaging in. And it's
and that's a connection. I've done this exercise before with clients. I've actually gone through and said, we're going to do what she just did. We're not going to do it for 20 minutes. We're going to do it for 2. And on one hand, they hate me because it's the most uncomfortable exercise they've ever had. They laugh, they giggle, they sweat. They don't know what to do because they are so vulnerable. They're so stripped of language. There is no words. It's just looking at somebody. And on the other hand, it's one of the most powerful things they've ever done. Just sitting and being present with somebody else. So it goes back to that idea that we're talking about, that this fear of connection is real. And I'm sure it's one of the things that over time we need to get past, even when it brings into this alignment, that we are so used to being disaligned. Well, what would it feel like to be aligned? Well, if we've never thought about that, we've never experienced that, then everything feels different and new. When something feels new, sometimes it feels like the other, even though the irony is the other is connection. So
I love that because that's actually something that we had our intention when we created executive alignment experiences and alignment experiences for teams to engage in was, how do we make alignment accessible, doable, and non-disruptive? And I don't mean the Silicon Valley use of the term non-disruptive, because what we're doing actually kind of is shaking up things, right? Yep. But I mean to a person, not disrupting a person, not disrupting a team, only adding value. How do you make sure that when you're creating connection between people, you're doing it in a way that feels good? It might feel a little uncomfortable in the moment, but no one's going to walk away from there going, oh my God, I am, whatever negative thing you want to say. And we've actually never seen that as a result. So that's been our intention around this, knowing that what we're doing is increasing vulnerability and connection among people. We want to do it in a way that's more accessible and edible for people, so that they can digest it in the moment. They're not doing things that are so uncomfortable that it's just way too outside their comfort zone. Yeah. And it's also doable and non-disruptive to them and the people in the room.
We're not going to cause you to go and do any bungee cord jumping. This is not about that. We're going to take baby steps and we're going to build up comfort as along the way. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm going to ask one last question, and we will probably have to have another interview at some point. So maybe we can say, Stay tuned for part 2. Okay. But here's my question. Talked about alignment. Perfect. Get that. Or I'm getting it. There are some that believe, maybe Zuckerberg included, that this is the last generation that human beings will be making the predominant amount of decisions for themselves. That we could see that with the advent of AI and metaverses and so forth, that what it is to be human will continue to change and morph to include and adapt to technology of some form or another. Maybe it's a pill, maybe it's something in your head, maybe it's the glasses, maybe it's the virtual reality taking on a much greater level. All of those things seem to be coming our way. How does the human being authentically connect and align to one another when this new character is coming in called technology?
I love that. And actually, I'll use a historical example here. I don't know if you've ever have you ever heard of the book, The End is Always Near by Dan Carlin?
No, but I'm going to have to write it down.
I was going to say this would be 100% up your alley. So essentially, and the book, by the way, it was almost divine timing. It came out, I think, a couple months before the pandemic started. And it was called The End is Always Near. And the intro talks about pandemics. And I'm sitting there in March 2020 reading this thing going, oh my God. So anyways, the reason I bring this up is if you think about the tech we have now versus what we had 40,000 years ago, it is dramatically different. Are we still human?
We are. And will we still be human in another 40,000 years?
So my point is, and I love this. So when we think about ourselves, you talk about intuition. I love how you talk about it. I call what you call intuition, I usually call discernment. Same, right? It's that place inside of us, this knowing that if you listen to it and you channel it, good things happen, right? You don't really get bad results from doing that. Can you ever strip away a knowing? Ever? Really? I mean, you can always add in other technology, but can you ever just strip away the part of us that actually makes us us? You can strip away the trauma, the painful memories, the experiences, the stories that you might be telling yourself, but could you ever strip away yourself from yourself? Because that energy.
No, right. And I agree with where you're going. And I think that intuition is, in a sense, one of the greatest expressions of what your true authentic self is. Exactly. I think that is sort of the core DNA. When you really get to that point where you are able to tap into and trust that part, that's that knowing, that discernment, that intuition, you are accessing more of yourself when you are not. You know, there is a greater span of experience and expression when that happens. So I agree with you. I'm just saying, while that will always be there potentially, are we, because of our and this is, I'm not trying to be fatalistic here, reliance on technology, that particular part of us is getting less and less and less airtime, whether it's because we're relying on whatever, or because of other conditions in the world that, you know, we even in companies are we looking more towards data versus, well, Rachel, what does your intuition say? Well, we don't ask those questions, right? We need to be asked. And I understand that this is important, but I wonder whether or not, is there a squashing of this intuitive part of the human existence, partly because of the fact that we are getting sloppy in our own personal responsibility because other things, technology, is doing things for us that we didn't have to do, that we had to do before.
So I love that you're asking that. And I think that's why alignment is now codified as a practice, because we don't talk about intention enough in business. And what is intention related to, if not ourselves? Those are our intentions. Hopefully the intention coming forward is from you. You're not stealing someone else's and going, this feels terrible, but I'll go with it. Right. It would not be from you. Like, it would feel terrible if that intention is not authentic to yourself, with your own knowing. So yes, let's bring more resurgence to alignment as a practice, because that's going to bring more resurgence to intention and intuition, because those two things are absolutely related and they maximize business performance. So we don't have to get into all the touchy-feely when most of the time we talk with customers. We don't start our sale off with, do you want to be authentic? You
No, do you
start
want to
with
make a buck? Yeah.
Maximize business performance,
Mission.
dissolve silos, mission, execution, strategy execution, revenue capture strategy. That's what you're starting with. It just so happens that to do those things effectively, really effectively, you cannot avoid creating alignment. And alignment needs intention is part of that because it's part of the definition. So you have a way in.
Rachel, this is the longest podcast episode in my history, I think. I haven't had one go this long. And it's usually because part of it is like, all right, let's move it along here. And so how people can connect to you. And the other times I'm thinking like, no, we got to stick to a 40-minute round. Now I think we're probably well into 50. And I have to ask yet another good question. Maybe not good, but maybe it's a question. And we'll just say, all right, so we're going to go for an hour here practically.
Change it up for your listeners.
Yeah, baby. What's your spiritual path? How does this align to that? And do you have one?
Love that question. So I have a question for you. What do you mean personally by spiritual path? I feel like there's so many ways of describing that.
Do you have how would you say this? Do you have a perspective that you are part of something much greater and that there may be some sort of larger intelligence beyond yourself? And I don't mean this in terms of religion, or it could be, you might believe in Jesus or Buddha, all those things are there, but I'm trying to create not a term, but more of a sense that there is some sort of larger expanded intelligence of which we are a part and of which we are.
Thank you for sharing your explanation of that on the fly, by the way. I share the same view as you are. You described it very well in terms of how you would describe, your spiritual path, if you will, as a question.
Okay.
So if you think of a circle and you think of the center of the circle as something that is source, the universe, whatever you want to call it, right? I look at it as there are infinite points on a circle, all of which connect to that thing that you just talked about. This force, this energy, 60% plus of our universe is measured to be dark energy. Dark meaning we don't know what it is. Energy means energy. So I think, well, if everything that I feel and taste and smell around me is matter as we know it, and that comprises about 6% of the known of the universe. And then we can talk about dark matter and if that's actually energy, different form or whatnot. Science is still shifting that out.
Or are we actually tasting matter at all?
Exactly. So with our current understanding, we have as a percentage of what makes up the universe, we have far greater percentage of energy than we do matter. And so I think, well, how could there not be? And this is my own personal view. I would never presume to say anything about anyone else's. We're all entitled to our own intuition around this. Okay, I feel like there's something bigger and there's something more connected and that there are infinite ways to access it. So you can think of all the major religions, you can think of philosophies, you can think of different spiritual practices. A circle, by definition, a line has infinite points. You can subdivide that line infinitely into number of points. So when you think of a circle, there are infinite points. And if the center of that circle is source, universe, energy, whatever that is, you could be Jewish, Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, non-denominational. You could go, you know what? I don't believe in any of that. And life just exists here and I'm going to be happy with that. It's fine. You're still an energetic being. We all have our own ways of working in this world. This is all of the human experience. I personally believe that I'm connected to something larger. And that's out of actually a sense of great humbleness and humility. I came to that because the work that we're doing is so, it touches so many lives. It's changed a lot of lives of the people that we've worked with. And so I think to myself, I'm not the one who sat down and wrote this definition out. Even the people I talked with, like this is coming potentially from through me. Exactly. Just like when you read George R.R. Martin, right? Holy God, that man, not God as in God, but like, wow, I'm trying not to curse on your podcast.
That's
that
okay.
man has created a masterpiece. What inspirational source showed up with, right? Artists and artists of all types understand this idea of channeling. And they're like, this inspiration has struck. I was able to write my book in 2 weeks. It was the fastest thing ever. It just poured out of me. That's our practice around alignment. And so I say this with a great source of humility and humbleness, because I would not ever say, I'm the one doing this and only me.
I would agree with you, Rachel, 100%. I had a week of facilitations and they went extremely well. And I always feel very humble that I feel like that I'm not the one who, yes, I had some role to play, but I just sort of feel like a vessel. And if I can get out of the way of myself to let the flow, call it intuition, call it something else that's sort of passing through me to get to wherever it needs to go, it's exhilarating, and it also is very humbling. And that's where I think the reason why I was asking this question about what's your spiritual path, if you have one, is that it seems consistent with your model, that if we're going to be talking about individual alignment and alignment to intentionality and to your actions and so forth, and teams and organizations, well, then that probably is going to go on a cosmic level. If you were to extend that out beyond, right? Why not? And I would figure it had to. So listen, this has been great. I really think that we need to continue this on at some point. Maybe we'll bring you back here in another few weeks or so. But I'll give you a final thought, or final question, which is, how can people follow you, connect with you, and learn more about what you're about?
Absolutely. And by the way, that what you mentioned, I'll just put an exclamation point on what you had asked earlier about how you showed up. It's me, but it's also, right? It's that telling and co-creation. So I hope that I'm on the same wavelength around. It's not that it's not me. It's co-creation with something else as well.
Totally got it. Yep.
So yes, listeners can go to getinline.com and feel free to peruse our website, which lays out the basics of alignment, how to, kind of walk through it, see if this might apply to you, and also subscribe to our alignment newsletter, which is around all things alignment on the website. And they can get in touch with us there.
Rachel, I got 3 hours of sleep last night because I lost, connection to my plane. The pilot was sick and I had to sleep over in some nice little dingy hotel in Seattle. But I got just so much energy as a result of this conversation. I thought I'd going to take a nap, and now I got to go for a run.
That is so what I love it. I am too, by the way. I don't even know what I'm going to do after this, but something along the lines of activity. So for sure.
Thanks again. Let's definitely stay in touch.
Sounds great.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.